All right, hey everybody, so this is Josh Bruce and we're continuing to sort of work out the modeling experience for Amos, and where we sort of left off was basically we want to be able to pull all the blue stuff out, right, without having to do too much work to then plug all of that stuff back into a different scenario such as this, right? So again, that's one of the reasons that I chose Laravel as the framework, is that it allows you to create the database schema from scratch, which once you have all the tables and fields and everything, like, it really doesn't matter who's monkeying with it, right? Who's querying against it, which is what the models do. And we also talked about component and entities a little bit. I did want to add that one of the other things with components and entities compared to using straight Blade templates or straight HTML templates, right? So like HTML with PHP tokens inside of them, is that every time you, or rather every time we say echo or print, that's an IO call, right? And so and every time those curly braces, right? So in Blade it's double curly braces, in PHP templates it's just print. But every time that happens, you're making an IO call, or we're making an IO call, right? And so if you have an or have a Blade template, that comes down to a for each loop, so at for each, and then we loop over it, and then we have like li, say we're making a list of items, li, curly brace li to close it out, and let's say that happens like 100 times. Not only have we created now however many tabs over, like let's say it's 8 tabs over 100 times, which is 800 tabs, as well as 800 carriage returns. Not only have we done that, but the curly brace translates to print and echo statements. So it's IO. We're running IO running IO 800 times. And so one of the things that doing it using component and entities is that it collects all of this sort of in memory. And with today's technology and servers, chances of us actually running out of like cache or memory before actually, basically, the chances of us having a buffer overflow is pretty slim. So basically you have all of that HTML, and then what we do inside of the Blade template is it's straight PHP, so Blade doesn't process it because it doesn't find any of its tokens. So it goes over to PHP, and then basically what PHP does is it calls the render function or the print function once, right? So it's one IO call, and it's ridiculous. And like I said, I think there was a difference, but I wasn't very scientific in measuring it or anything like that. So with regard to speed. All right, so now we're talking about third-party interfaces and libraries. So the first one that we use in Eightfold is our payment processor, which is Stripe, or mainly Stripe. And I'm sure you're all shocked. So let's say payment processor API. And Stripe actually has a library, Stripe API lib, and this is a third-party piece of code. So we don't really want to be connected to it if we can avoid it, right? Because we may end up using a different API or something like that. And Laravel has done a good job of abstracting a sort of generic API for multiple payment processors. But again, like, one of the challenges that we're setting ourselves is how not to be totally dependent on Laravel for everything, right? And so, well, not to be dependent, but to be able to change in the future, right? And so if I wanted to change out to say PayPal or something like that, well, one, I've got to figure out how to get the historical data over to PayPal, but then I also need to deal with Stripe. But the point being is that this connection comes out of our entities and use cases. It does not come out of like models or something Laravel, right? Like the controllers should not interface with the Stripe API lib, right? Just like the controller should not interface with the database, okay? Now, the thing with Stripe is no matter how much I wish it was faster, it sometimes isn't for certain things. And so what we're going to do here, I might need to make some of this smaller. But what I've sort of, I don't want to say discovered, I discovered it in the same way Christopher Columbus discovered America, is that basically if we store some things locally, like a cache, as though we're caching it, it becomes a lot faster. And so that's kind of what I do with the transactions. So when somebody runs a transaction, I'll store locally what I need to store locally. And then when I request it, I'll request the local copy. And then if I don't get enough data, then I will go ahead and call out to Stripe. Let's go ahead and shrink down our letters to 36, which means we can sort of make this smaller. And it's okay that they're not all the same size. At least for me, right? Like I know somebody out there is probably just like, oh my God. All right, so we have more room now, which is good. Oh, forgot the router. Let's go ahead and do that. Yeah. Oh, and just to make this easy fix here. Yeah. All right, so that's Stripe. That's our payment processor. So there are going to be, oh, and I should probably border line. Let's go ahead and just make it this broken thing. And we're going to change the color to this gray. And the reason I'm doing that is that basically this probably doesn't need to be part of the beginnings of the build, right? I don't want to concentrate first and foremost on making that happen. Instead, I want to concentrate first and foremost on persistent storage, right? And sort of testing that and making sure that it's happening as expected, and being able to, and we'll probably start with files just to make sure that this is working. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Now then, the other thing we have is another one that you're probably shocked about, which is, come on, MailChimp. And right, and so MailChimp, I just want the color, I don't want the font size. Thank you. So MailChimp is a mailing list processor, though they've started to branch out quite a bit. So There is that. I can't remember if they have. So the Stripe library is handled, is actually provided to you by Stripe. Whereas it looks like the MailChimp API, we still need to go through others, which is fine. And I believe it used to have, maybe it's in GitLab. So just to, while we're signing in and everything, so one of the reasons that I have Eightfold in two separate places is that I do try to keep Eightfold separated from me as the owner. So yeah, we did not start to make our own. So we're going to need some type of, or we're going to want some type of there we go. API lib that goes into MailChimp eventually, right? Right, and then last but certainly not least, and I think they actually use the same orange, like this same orange as Laravel. So to keep things from being confusing, and I do think Stripe uses a purple, could be wrong. I'm going to go ahead and choose that color. Wow, that actually feels more like the Laravel orange. No, that's... Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's try this other orange for the Laravel stuff. Sorry, I get kind of weird about colors, and I'm sorry this is not accessible. I at least acknowledge that that is the case. I feel like Doc Brown. Sorry, this model is not built to scale. Actually, let's just go ahead and pull this up here. Make this down here. All right, so mailing list, processor, right? And we're not, so the entities and use cases and these API libs, it's kind of like, basically we don't own these. The storage of this data and that sort of a thing, and the interface for it. Of course, that also means that we don't have to maintain it. Of course, that also means that we're kind of screwed if we lose one. So mitigation, risk mitigation, it's kind of about having backup plans, right? So if Stripe somehow goes out of business, and chances are the only way that's going to happen at this point is if they get sued or bought by someone who immediately closes the whole operation down. Probably switch over to Stripe or something else. But it is good to have a backup plan. All right, so now we're going to do event processor. Now this event processor one is interesting because right now we're only using Eventbrite, but being able to broadcast to multiple channels and things like that would probably be a good idea. And I do think Eventbrite is another one where we have our own library. But again, this right now is primarily about what is the separation of concerns, what do we maintain, and how do we maintain that separation of concerns, right? So we maintain the teal stuff. We maintain the separation of concerns by keeping these communication barriers or these communication channels only open through something that we maintain. So this way, Laravel isn't getting all hung up about what the API lib is doing and that sort of a thing. And then same thing with no, that's pretty much it. And the entities and use cases aren't really getting hung up on anything except for what the models are doing and all the other data, because this, as Bob Martin would probably say, is our application. Right? This entities and use cases spot is our application. This is the part that holds the rules that say an administrator can see that page or not. Right? All right, let's see. All right, so that's good. Let's go ahead and save that. And what we're going to do is we're going to save it. We're just going to save it to the desktop, and it's going to be Amos model. All right, now what we're also going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to go to GitHub. I'm really glad I'm signed in. So because this is a real deal project, or at least it will be, and just like Shoot PHP, where I'm just kind of like, I don't know, we're going to put this inside of GitHub. I also still haven't quite totally figured out GitLab. Oh, do I want to put it in GitLab? Yeah, let's go ahead and put it in GitLab. So, because I like showing you guys like what it really feels like, and the thing about it is that what it really feels like is not that you get 2 weeks to prepare a presentation on a framework in an environment that you've been playing with for the last 30 years, right? So this profile has just been set up on my laptop. It had nothing, so if you go back to some of the previous videos, there are steps of videos of me going, you know what, I'm finally getting annoyed by this, I need to get this package, I need to get this thing over here, right? So anyhow, Amos PHP, I trail everything with PHP. Some people prefix. That's just kind of how I roll. And we are going to make it a private repo. I am going to start it with a README, just because it's habit for me now to start things with a repo. All right, so there we go. And we're going to go ahead and clone from HTTPS and come over here to GitHub desktop. And we're going to say clone a repo from a URL. We're going to paste that. Desktop Amos PHP, which is exactly what we want. What is my username? What is my password? Well, I guess that worked. Okay. So now, if I don't think we've got time to kind of go too far with that, so I'm going to hop over here and sort of explain why I decided to call it Amos. So from 2005, I think, up until about 2010, I had been working on a framework, a content management system, whatever you want to call it. And because this is what you did in 2005. with PHP. And so, some of this is not the best decisions in the world. Other stuff, I've looked at this and been like, what in the world were you thinking? But what was fascinating to me, right, was at the time when I built this out and everything like that, if the WYSIWYG text editor that I had in there was gone, the download size was like 500 kilobytes, right? And I know that PHP is a server-side language, and we're like, why are you worried about file size and this sort of a thing? Well, if your framework altogether is, say, 20, 30 megabytes with itself and all of its dependencies, you still have to download that, right, through Composer and that sort of a thing. And the other comment about this with regard to it being so small is that it's a lot easier for one person to pick up 500K worth of code than it is for somebody to pick up enough to make 10 megabytes of code, right? So anyhow, but it's horrible code. I mean, just look at this initializer. And I can't believe I was using a init back then. I actually don't remember the last time I edited or opened this file. But I mean, check this out. It's nested if statements, and I mean, very procedural, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just there are other ways that I would do this now. And I had started building my own database class, which is kind of perfectly normal. Again, 2005. And it would have evolved into, I think, an ORM solution, right, an object relational mapping solution, had I kept working on it. But even this, like, select is a capital letter. Like, why? What were you thinking? But at the time, I guess it made sense. And that database class is actually the class that I was really sort of the most proud of, right? It was the one that actually got refactored the most to sort of be the cleanest. So you could send in a raw query. And here you see me, I've got this like returns obj, right? Like the objects from the database, and same thing with string. But then if we also look at AMK database, like this is, you can see where it's starting to get into my habit of doing things. So I require the database.php, and then I extend it so that you can construct your own database. And then I've got select, and it does do, I think, nope, it is just straight. Yeah, I basically just took CRUD and built it this way. And I came up with a dictionary or associative array setup that would work for this. And I don't know, maybe if we get bored, I'll go ahead and we can make our own database query thing. And actually, that's kind of what I do kind of want to do over here, right? Is that, kind of what I think we're looking at here would actually be something like this. So let's bring this over here. I'm going to say copy and paste, and I'm just going to call this data fetcher, if I could type or spell, right? And so if we have data fetcher, and basically it's the thing that really connects with all these data objects and other data models, right? Then all the arrows sort of come from it. And that way, we've got basically this sort of back and forth between the data fetcher and our entities and use cases. And it kind of makes us less dependent on us. But yeah, so that's might be where we're going with this, and I'm going to outline it as well. So line dot dot dot. Make it a little bit bigger. Change the color. Right. And so that way the entities and use cases actually kind of become our own little controllers, and yeah, but we'll see how this shakes out. But that's why I chose Amos, is basically when I first started thinking about redoing the eightfold infrastructure, I was kind of like, maybe resurrect some of Amos and see what's there. Because the other thing is, like, there's these modules. So basically we have these what Laravel would call service providers or services. So like it's all there, right? Like foundationally, but basically at 2010, my life went kind of pear-shaped with regard to what I needed to focus on, and yeah, it just kind of died on the vine, which is fine because when I started getting back into this, Laravel had already been made. And I have always said, and will continue to say until it's not true, that Laravel is what Amos would have been if I would have kept writing it, right? At least close enough, right? From a high architectural level, we're good, and in a lot of ways with functionality. So there might be some things that I look at and go, let's do this. But I mean, when I first thought about scavenging this, I think I cracked open, I think it was AMK admin, and I just looked at it and I was like, what? You were thinking there was something salvageable from this thing? Are you nuts? And this is funny. Rasmus might get a kick out of this. So one of the reasons that he developed PHP or created PHP was to basically get HTML out of people's Perl language or Perl scripts, right? So that people could have HTML and the developers could still have Perl, where it was a compiled language and type safe and everything like that. But basically the business could go in and create these HTML files with PHP tokens that sort of let them interface into the Perl scripts. And so here I am writing PHP, and I'm literally just building a string by hand of HTML. Good times. So yeah, so might grab some of that code. Now let's see what we can do. Amos 01, no. Where is it? Desktop. Amos PHP. All right, there we go. Let's go ahead and open up Shoop and steal some of this stuff. So I'm going to want to steal the git ignore. Ooh, we should get, because it is Laravel, we should get one of the gists that has this Laravel dot git ignore. And I am trying to figure out, ooh, hello, let's not do that. I am trying to figure out how much new stuff I want to try for these videos. Like, do I want to go whole hog and do Tailwind CSS as well as Livewire if I can? I'm still not sure how to get access to Livewire. Vue.js if I can't get my hands on Livewire, right? Like, how much new stuff do I want to introduce myself to and subject you to watching? All right, because that could be painful. So we're going to say composer.json. Go ahead and save that. And what do we got going on here? So eightfold, and we're going to say Amos PHP. We'll leave it the question marks. Library, MIT, I suppose. Illuminate support. That is actually not what we want. We want, we're going to do composer require to get the latest version of Laravel. So we don't need anything there yet because we have not decided. Ooh. Should I use the installer? Yeah, let's go ahead and use the installer. So Terminus or not. Terminus, open default shell. Is Laravel even installed? Yeah. All right, so install Laravel from scratch. Global require. There we go. While that's doing that, let me check something. I think this is what we need. Are you... This is the thing about Composer that I don't like compared to NPM is NPM a lot of times they're very, with most things, they're very helpful, right? Like they've got progress bars of how far things are going. They've got maybe rolling percentages that get updated. They'll do whatever. With Composer, though, it is definitely more kind of, okay, are you working? Like, what's going on? So, all right, we're going to see if this creates the project. Project directory is not empty. I really don't like that warning, and I wish it would just overwrite by default, because I can never remember sort of what if there even is a flag, because I think even with having Git in there, it's going to go, you know, oh, it's not empty. Yeah. So let's go back to Finder. Let's undo that move. We're going to create a new folder on the desktop, and we're going to say cd temp, and we're going to say Laravel dot. That's going to bring everything in. But speaking of which, like with the 500 kilobyte thing, right? Again, I know at runtime it's kind of not that big of a deal, but this is one of sort of the drawbacks of us using a lot of packages, especially if the packages sort of get bloated away from what they originally were meant to do, which is not the case with Laravel at all. And Laravel is actually pretty darn small, all things being considered. But it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, well, like I said, you know, yeah, yours, and on top of that, it's the dependencies thing, right? Like yours may be 500K even, but you're going to download another megabyte from this, and another megabyte from that, and another megabyte from this, and it's just like, okay, this is where I live now. Which, yeah, I mean, it's sort of the trade-off I think that we make for being able to get spun up quickly with tools that we're familiar with, right? Or get spun up quickly building something because we have tools that we're familiar with, right? Because it's not like we talk about frameworks and modules and you can just get started faster. Yes, you can if you use the ones you're already familiar with. If you use ones that you're not familiar with, like if I grabbed Rails, oh man, that would be an interesting series. Maybe we do that. Like once we get Amos going and Eightfold sort of back up, from a website perspective, maybe I'll do it again in Rails and see if the architecture that we've come up with and borrowed from Uncle Bob, if I can really just replace all this red orange with Ruby or with Rails, and then replace all of this teal, or just plug in this teal and rewrite it in Ruby, like port it over to Ruby, and magically it will be delicious. All right, so we're there. We've got that going. And I can't remember. There is a copy or a move file, but I'm not a terminal guy, so I know. Shocking. No, I don't. Do I need to put that in source? Do I want to put that in source? Let's see what the folder says. So temp, it has the git ignore, it has the .env, so on and so forth. Tests. Yeah, no, this is meant to be root, which is fine. So let's open up the Finder, desktop, Amos PHP. Let's delete the README file, and let's keep our composer file. The git ignore can't be replaced because it's invisible. So let's delete our git ignore because this should be the same one. All right. And then we'll look at our composer file. And look at that composer file. Use origami to create a new pane below. So let's do that. So we need to have the name. We're going to have the description. We're going to have the version. We're going to have the type, license, authors. So let's take all that, paste it down here. Require PHP 7.1.3, that's fine too. And then we should still have PHP unit, different setup than ours, which is fine. Code coverage, I keep trying to get code coverage to work. I can't remember if I've mentioned this before, but it's not, and so yeah. Tests is there, minimum stability, blah blah blah, load, la la la. Okay, so that's all we really needed from that. And so we can delete this here. All right, so we have Laravel. Let's go ahead and start up MAMP Pro. Or get it set up to point to the right place. So we're going to say amos.local. Come in here to the desktop, go to Amos PHP, point to public, choose that. I don't think we need to do any of that stuff. Right. So there we go. And we're not actually even going to look at it, I don't think. Yeah, because we still would have to like set up the .env file and stuff like that with a database, because if we try right now, because Laravel actually, what? Maybe not. Laravel does not require a database connection. Wow, okay, cool. So there it is. So we know that's working. Good times. What else do we have going on? Let's close Shoop. That way we just have Amos. And let's go ahead and run see if PHP unit will just get there. Nope. So vendor. Oh, I'm in temp still. Amos PHP vendor bin PHP unit. 2 tests, 2 assertions, all green. All right, cool. So our test environment, right, and this is why we use frameworks, or part of the reason why we use frameworks. Now, yeah, so we're good. So basically we have all the bright orange stuff, or all the red orange stuff. And so what we're going to work on, or what we're going to sort of try to focus on, is all the teal stuff. And because if we work on the teal stuff, the theory is that the other things will sort of fall out. So anyhow, with that said, as always, thank you for making the time. I definitely do appreciate it, and see you around.